The court of the Rakari Empire had never heard a human scream like that before. Prince Keed, son of the Rakari queen, stumbled back in shock as Craig Rice's bellow of rage shook the palace banquet hall. The human delegation from Earth stood in a tight knot behind their seething ambassador, all of them glaring daggers at Keed. "How dare you treat us like this?" Craig roared, jabbing a finger at the prince. His face was flushed crimson, the cords of his neck bulging. "We came here in peace, desperate for your help to save our dying world, and you have the audacity to proposition us like we're your personal harem?" Murmurs of disbelief rippled through the assembled alien dignitaries. No one spoke to a Rakari royal like this, especially not some upstart ape from a backwater planet. But Craig was beyond caring about protocol. He had pledged his life to secure Earth's future, and he would not let his people be belittled. "You call yourselves an advanced civilization, but you're nothing more than a bunch of entitled, hypocritical tyrants," Craig seethed. "Where were you when we were dying by the billions from war, famine, disease? Oh, that's right. You were too busy sipping alien wine and screwing your concubines to give a damn about us lesser beings. Well, no more." Craig stepped forward until he was nose to nose with a wide-eyed Keed. The human's anger was a palpable force, making the air shimmer. "Mark my words, Your Highness," Craig growled. "We humans are done begging and scraping. We're here to forge our own destiny among the stars, with or without your permission. Get in our way, and you'll find out just how lesser we really are." In the stunned silence that followed Craig's outburst, Queen Zara rose from her throne, her regal bearing commanding the attention of all present. She appraised the human ambassador with a calculating gaze, her expression inscrutable. "Ambassador Rice," she said, her voice a silken purr, "you have demonstrated a fire and conviction rarely seen in this court. I would speak with you further, in private." Craig hesitated, suspicion warring with curiosity in his eyes. After a long moment, he gave a curt nod. "As you wish, Your Majesty." The Queen turned to her son, still standing in shock beside the human delegation. "Keed, you will accompany the ambassador and his retinue during their stay. Show them the wonders of our empire, and learn what you can of their people and their plight." Keed opened his mouth to protest, but a sharp look from his mother silenced him. With a bow, he gestured for the humans to follow him out of the banquet hall. As they walked the gleaming corridors of the palace, Cade pointed out marvels of Rakari technology, matter replicators that could create any food or object with a mere thought, zero-point energy reactors that powered the city-sized structure, neural implants that granted instant access to the vast storehouse of Rakari knowledge. But as they descended into the lower levels, Craig began to notice signs of a darker reality lurking beneath the polished surface. Gaunt-faced servants in plain gray tunics scurried about their tasks, eyes downcast. Armed guards stood watch at every intersection, their weapons always trained on the lower castes. "Is this the price of your utopia?" Craig asked, unable to keep the disgust from his voice. "A shining palace built on the backs of slaves?" Keed flinched as if struck. He had never seen his home through outsider eyes before, never questioned the rigid order that governed every aspect of Rakari life. But now, confronted by Craig's unfiltered perspective, doubts began to gnaw at his certainty. As the tour continued, Craig shared more about the desperate situation on Earth, the resource wars that had devastated the planet, the millions living in squalor under the boot of megacorporations, the impotent Earth government that existed only to serve its corporate masters. The Rakari were humanity's last hope, a chance to secure the technology and aid needed to pull their species back from the brink. Despite their differences, Craig and Keed found themselves drawn together by a shared sense of unease, a growing realization that both their societies were built on foundations of sand. In quiet moments stolen between official functions, they began to plan, to scheme, to dig for the truth that others wanted buried. But even as they worked in secret, forces within the Rakari palace were mobilizing against them. Powerful nobles and shadowy intelligence operatives saw the humans as a threat to their entrenched power, an unpredictable element that could destabilize centuries of carefully maintained control. And so, as Craig and Keed chased down leads and forged unlikely alliances in their quest for justice, the trap was already being laid. a trap that threatened to ensnare not just them, but the future of two worlds. As Craig and Cade pored over the encrypted files they had managed to extract from the palace's data cores, a chilling picture began to emerge. Line after line of damning evidence pointed to a vast web of corruption and deceit that reached into the highest echelons of Rakari society. "I don't believe it," Cade whispered, his face ashen as he stared at the holographic display. "Zoran, my own brother, how could he be involved in something like this?" Craig placed a hand on the prince's shoulder, his expression grim. "Power corrupts, Cade, and it looks like your brother has been seduced by the worst kind of power, the kind that thrives on chaos and suffering." The human ambassador studied the data with a keen eye, zeroing in on a series of coded transmissions between Zoran and Warlord Krath. As he ran them through the decryption algorithms, the true scope of their plan became clear. "They're going to attack my people," Craig said, his voice tight with barely controlled rage. "They'll make it look like we were killed by some rival kingdom, then use our deaths as an excuse to launch another damn war." Cade shook his head in disbelief, the weight of his family's sins pressing down on him like a physical burden. How could he have been so blind, so naive? A sudden chirp from the communication array snapped them out of their reverie. Craig opened the channel, and the face of a young Rakari woman appeared on the screen. "Ambassador Prince Cade, I am Zara," she said, her voice low and urgent. "I believe we have a common cause." Over the next several hours, Zara filled them in on the underground resistance movement that had been quietly building support among the lower castes of Rakari society. Scientists, engineers, artists, all those who chafed under the Empire's rigid control and yearned for a better way. "We've suspected for a long time that something was rotten at the heart of the palace," Zara explained, "but we never had proof, until now." Together, the three of them hatched a desperate plan to expose the conspiracy and prevent the sabotage of the Earth Rakari negotiations. They would infiltrate the Cabal's stronghold, a heavily guarded compound deep in the Zantari Mountains, and broadcast their evidence to the entire Rakari Empire. But even as they laid their preparations, trouble was brewing back at the palace. Admiral Velos, the grizzled hero of a dozen campaigns, had grown increasingly suspicious of Prince Cade's association with the humans. He shadowed the young royal's every move, his hawkish gaze missing nothing. "You walk a dangerous path, my prince," Velos rumbled, cornering Cade in a deserted hallway. "Consorting with these outsiders, neglecting your duties, one might question where your loyalties truly lie." Cade met the Admiral's accusation with a defiant stare, drawing himself up to his full height. "My loyalty is to the truth, Admiral, and to justice. I fear those are concepts that have become strangers in these halls." As Velos watched the prince stalk away, a cold smile twisted his lips. He activated his wrist communicator and spoke into it softly. "Lord Zoran, I believe it's time we had a talk about your brother." Miles away in the bustling heart of the capital city, Craig, Cade, and Zara moved through the shadows, their faces hidden beneath hooded cloaks. They had to be on their guard now more than ever. Eyes were everywhere, enemies around every corner. But they would not be deterred. The future of their worlds hung in the balance, and come what may, they would see this through to the end. Craig's fingers flew across the holographic interface, his face illuminated by the soft blue glow. Cade leaned in, eyes darting between the scrolling data and the human's intense expression. "There," Craig said, pointing to a series of encoded transmissions. "Your brother's digital fingerprints are all over this." Cade's shoulders sagged as the evidence mounted. "We need to act fast. The negotiations—" "Already on it," Craig replied, activating a secure comm channel. "Zara, you there?" The young Rakari woman's face materialized on the screen. "I'm here. What do you need?" "Access to the palace's secure channels. We need to get ahead of this before it's too late." Zara nodded, her fingers a blur of motion. "I've got someone who can help. Patching you through now." The screen flickered, revealing the weathered face of a Rakari military officer. His eyes narrowed as he took in Craig and Cade. "General Torvaz," Cade said, straightening, "we need your help." Torvaz's voice was gruff. "Prince Cade, I hope you understand the gravity of what you're doing. I do, General, more than you know. As Torvaz confirmed their suspicions about Zoran and Krath's plan, Craig's mind raced. He paced the small room, muttering to himself. We can't just sit back and wait for them to strike, he said suddenly, turning to face the others. We need to draw them out, force their hand. Kaid frowned. What are you suggesting? Craig's eyes glinted with tenacity. We feed them false information, make them think we've moved the negotiations. When they show up to ambush us, we'll be waiting for them instead, Torvaz finished, a hint of admiration in his voice. Keed hesitated, conflict etched across his face. Zoran is still my brother. Craig placed a hand on the prince's shoulder. I know this isn't easy, but think of the lives at stake, on both our worlds. After a long moment, Keed nodded. Do it. As they set their plan in motion, reports flooded in from the outer rim. Skirmishes between rival kingdoms escalated into full-blown battles. Planetary defense grids went dark. Refugee ships streamed towards the core worlds. In the palace corridors, Admiral Velos watched Prince Kaid with narrowed eyes. The young royal's furtive meetings and hushed conversations hadn't gone unnoticed. Velos tapped his communicator, speaking in low tones to his most trusted lieutenant. Keep eyes on the prince at all times. I want to know everyone he talks to, everywhere he goes. As the negotiations loomed, tension coiled tight in Craig's chest. He triple-checked the false intel they'd leaked, praying it would be enough to lure Zoran's assassins into their trap. Torvaz's troops took up positions around the decoy location, their weapons primed and ready. Craig and Keed huddled with the general in a makeshift command center, monitoring incoming transmissions. Movement at the western approach, a soldier's voice crackled over the comm. Multiple targets, heavily armed. Craig exchanged a grim look with Keed. This was it. But even as they prepared to spring their trap, they remained unaware of the other pieces moving on the board. Admiral Velos's forces closed in from the east, while the real saboteurs bided their time, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The air hummed with impossibly strong energy as three separate factions converged, each believing they held the upper hand. In the growing twilight, the first shots rang out. Out! The night air crackled with energy weapons fire and the acrid smell of ozone. Craig ducked behind a low wall, his heart pounding. This wasn't supposed to happen, he hissed to Keid. How did Velos know? Before the prince could respond, a barrage of plasma bolts slammed into their cover. Debris rained down as Torvaz's troops returned fire, the battlefield erupting into chaos. We need to fall back, Keid shouted over the din. He grabbed Craig's arm, preparing to make a run for it. That's when Craig saw them. Velos' elite guard, their stealth suits shimmering as they materialized behind Kaid. Time seemed to slow as Craig registered the raised weapon, the finger tightening on the trigger. Without thinking, Craig shoved Keid aside. White-hot pain exploded through his chest as the energy blast meant for the prince tore into him instead. He crumpled to the ground, dimly aware of Keid's anguished cry. Through a haze of agony, Craig watched Keid take on the attackers with surprising ferocity. The young royal moved with fluid grace, his neural implants giving him split-second reaction times as he disarmed and incapacitated Velos's men. But even as Kaid fought, alarms blared from the palace. Zara's frantic voice cut through the comm. The inner sanctum's been breached. It's Zoran. He's going after the negotiations. Keid's face hardened. He knelt beside Craig, conflict warring in his eyes. I can't leave you. Craig gripped the prince's arm. Go, he rasped. Stop your brother. Save both our worlds. With a sharp nod, Keid sprinted towards the palace. Craig's vision swam, darkness encroaching at the edges. As consciousness slipped away, he prayed it had all been worth it. Inside the ornate halls of the inner sanctum, Kaid raced against time. He burst through the doors of the negotiation chamber to find a scene of pandemonium. Diplomats cowered as Zoran and his assassins held them at gunpoint. Brother, Zoran sneered, how kind of you to join us. Keid's eyes darted around the room, assessing the situation. It's over, Zoran. We know everything. Your deal with Krath, the false flag attack. Stand down now, and maybe there's still a chance. Zoran's laughter cut him off. Oh, you naive fool. You think this is about mere politics? This is destiny, little brother. The inevitable march of history. What are you talking about? The apology doctrine, Zoran said, his eyes gleaming with fervor. For millennia, our people have lived by it. Every slight, every offense paid for in blood. It's what's kept the galaxy in check, what's driven us to greatness. And now these humans dare to challenge it? Cade shook his head. You're talking about galactic war. Billions will die. A necessary sacrifice. The old ways must be preserved at any expense. A flash of movement caught Cade's eye. Zara materialized from a hidden passage, her phase shifter deactivating as she tackled Zoran from behind. In the ensuing scuffle, Cade disarmed the other assassins. But even as Zara subdued Zoran, a high-pitched whine filled the air. A shimmering hologram coalesced in the center of the room. A bomb, its countdown ticking away. No! Cade lunged for the device, but his hands passed right through it. The hologram flickered, revealing the symbol of the Zilorian Imperium. The explosion rocked the palace, and alarms screamed to life. On view screens throughout the chamber, Cade watched in horror as warships from a dozen kingdoms converged on their position. Amid the chaos, Queen Lyra burst into the room, her face ashen. "What have you done?" she demanded. Cade met his mother's gaze. "It wasn't us, but I know how we might still save this." He activated his comm. "This is Prince Cade. I need a medical team to my location immediately, and prepare the quantum regenerator in your private chambers." Lyra's eyes widened. "Cade, you can't be serious. That technology is untested on—" "It's our only hope," Cade insisted. "Trust me, Mother. We need him." As guards escorted the conspirators away, Cade turned to face the assembled diplomats. The Galactic Council chambers were in uproar, enraged ambassadors calling for immediate retaliation against the Zilorians. Cade took a deep breath. They had minutes, maybe seconds, before this spiraled beyond all control. Everything hinged on what happened next. And so he waited, praying that a single human's words could stem the tide of vengeance threatening to engulf them all. The Galactic Council chamber erupted into chaos. Ambassadors shouted accusations, fists pounding on ornate desks as the threat of war loomed large. Cade stood at the center, his voice barely audible above the din. "Silence!" The command cut through the noise, amplified by Queen Lyra's neural implant. As the room quieted, she continued, "We cannot allow this crisis to escalate further. I propose an emergency measure, a public trial of all conspirators to be held at Pax Primaris." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembly. Craig, still weak from his injuries, leaned heavily on Zara as he addressed the council. "As a neutral party, I volunteer to oversee these proceedings alongside Prince Cade." Within hours, a heavily armed escort shuttled Craig and Cade to the massive orbital station. Pax Primaris hung in space like a gleaming jewel, its vast courtrooms and detention facilities purpose-built for moments like this. As they disembarked, Craig marveled at the station's sheer scale. Transparent alloy domes revealed a breathtaking vista of stars, while gravitational fields simulated a planet-like atmosphere. Security drones buzzed overhead, their sensors scanning for any hint of threat. In the main courtroom, Craig and Cade took their seats at the raised dais. Below them, the accused, Zoran, Krath, and their co-conspirators sat in reinforced containment fields. Admiral Velos glowered from the gallery, his hawkish gaze fixed on Craig. Zara approached the witness stand, her voice steady as she recounted discovering the false flag plot. General Torvaz corroborated her testimony, presenting encrypted transmissions and financial records that tied Zoran and Krath to the planned attack. As Velos rose for cross-examination, his lips curled into a sneer. "And are we to trust the word of these humans? Upstart aggressors who would see our great empire fall?" Craig's teeth gritted. He'd had enough of Velos's xenophobic rhetoric. With a nod to Cade, he activated his neural link. "I called Jax Marlowe to the stand." A collective gasp rippled through the courtroom as the human hacker materialized via hologram. Jax's avatar grinned, neon data streams coursing over his virtual form. "Yo, Craig, heard you needed some dirt on the good admiral." Velos spluttered in protest, but it was too late. Jax's fingers danced through the air, projecting a holographic web of information. Bank records, private communications, and classified reports appeared before the stunned audience. Illegal weapons deals with the Thoraxian hive, Jax narrated. Bribes to customs officials. Oh, and my personal favorite, a manifesto calling for the genetic purification of allied species. Not a good look, Admiral. The courtroom erupted into scandalized whispers. Velos lunged forward, only to be restrained by security drones. Craig allowed himself a small smile of satisfaction. As Zoran took the stand, Kaid's posture stiffened. The brothers locked eyes, years of resentment and betrayal hanging between them. Why, Zoran? Kaid's voice cracked. How many humans died for your ambition? Zoran's facade crumbled. You don't understand. Our way of life, our very culture, it was all slipping away. Krath promised me power, a chance to preserve what made us great. I couldn't show weakness, couldn't apologize for... For what? Kaid shouted, rising to his feet. For murdering innocents? For nearly plunging us into war? The outburst shocked the courtroom into silence. Zoran slumped in his chair, his voice barely above a whisper. I was wrong. I'm sorry. Before Craig could process the unprecedented apology, Zara burst into the chamber. Your Honors, we've uncovered evidence of an even greater conspiracy. She uploaded data to the main display, revealing a web of communications between Krath and leaders of other belligerent empires. Their plan became horrifyingly clear. Orchestrate conflicts on both sides, leaving the galaxy weak and divided for conquest. Velos seized the moment of shock to make his move. He vaulted over the gallery railing, a concealed energy weapon materializing in his hand. Craig reacted on instinct, tackling the Admiral mid-leap. They crashed to the floor in a tangle of limbs. Velos was larger, stronger, but Craig fought with desperation. He could feel the heat of the energy weapon against his skin as they grappled. With a burst of adrenaline, Craig wrenched the weapon free. It skittered across the polished floor as security drones swarmed in, subduing Velos. Panting, Craig pulled himself to his feet. The courtroom was in an uproar, but he knew this was his chance. He activated the neural amplifier, his voice carrying to every corner of the vast chamber. Look at us, he began, gesturing to the chaos around them. Look at what this cycle of violence and retribution has wrought. On Earth, we learned the hard way that vengeance only breeds more vengeance. But we also learned something else, the power of sincere apology, of taking responsibility for our actions. Craig's gaze swept across the assembled dignitaries. I propose a new doctrine, one built on remorse, reconciliation, and restoration. Aggressors must make amends, not through blood, but through genuine contrition and restorative action. He outlined his vision, a framework for mandated public apologies and programs to heal the wounds of conflict. As he spoke, Craig saw something change in the eyes of those watching. Hope, fragile but unmistakable, began to blossom. Kaid stepped forward, placing a hand on Craig's shoulder. I endorse this conquered doctrine, he declared. Zara joined them, her voice ringing out in support. The council chambers erupted in a cacophony of voices. Many kingdoms, weary of endless war, saw this as their last, best chance for peace. But others, those who had long profited from conflict, reacted with fury. Amidst the chaos, a warning klaxon blared. Krath had somehow slipped his bonds, escaping in the confusion. As security forces mobilized to recapture him, Craig knew the real battle was just beginning. The Concord Doctrine offered a path to peace, but only if they could make it a reality. The Galactic Council chamber erupted in thunderous applause as the final vote tally appeared on the holographic display. The Concord Doctrine had passed, ushering in a new era of interstellar diplomacy. Craig exhaled, his shoulders sagging with relief. Kaid clasped his arm, a rare smile breaking through the prince's stoic facade. We did it, Kaid murmured. But their victory was short-lived. Alarms blared throughout the station. Zara's voice crackled over the comm. Craig, Kaid, Krath's escaped! They sprinted from the chamber, racing through corridors suddenly alive with panicked diplomats and security forces. Craig's neural link buzzed with incoming data, reports of prison breaks, terrorist strikes, and growing unrest across multiple systems. Months passed in a blur of crisis management and frantic diplomacy. Craig shuttled between worlds, overseeing the implementation of restorative justice programs and mandated apologies. Progress was slow, but tangible. Former enemies clasped hands, tears flowing as centuries of hatred began to crumble. Then came the attack on the Concord Tribunal Station. Craig stood at a viewpoint, watching shuttles full of human and alien delegates dock for a landmark reconciliation summit. A flash of movement caught his eye, Keed sprinting towards him, face contorted in alarm. "Craig, get down!" The prince tackled him as the world exploded. Heat seared Craig's skin, debris pummeling his body as Keed shielded him. The last thing Craig saw before darkness took him was the station splitting apart, bodies and twisted metal tumbling into the void. He awoke to the steady beep of medical equipment, his entire body racked with pain. Through blurred vision, he saw Zara bent over a console, her face haggard with exhaustion. "What happened?" Craig croaked. Zara's head snapped up. "Craig, thank the stars." She moved to his bedside, taking his hand. "You've been in a coma for weeks. The attack. It was Krath. Thousands dead." Craig struggled to sit up, wincing at the movement. "Kaid!" "He's alive, but in hiding. Zoran seized power on Rakari Prime. The Queen and I barely escaped." Zara's voice cracked. "Craig, it's all falling apart." Over the following days, Craig pieced together the dire situation. Krath's insurgency had spread like wildfire, exploiting simmering resentments and economic instability. The Concord Coalition was fracturing under the strain. As soon as he could stand, Craig threw himself back into the fight. He coordinated with General Torvaz, helping to shore up loyalist defenses against Zoran's advances. But without access to the royal family's resources, they were constantly on the back foot. It was Jax who finally gave them a shot at turning the tide. The hacker's holographic avatar materialized in their makeshift war room, lines of code scrolling across his translucent form. "I've cracked Krath's encryption," Jax announced, his usual bravado tempered by iron will. "You're not going to believe this." The assembled leaders watched in horror as Jax laid out Krath's endgame, a neural superweapon capable of enslaving entire populations. "We have to stop him," Craig said, his eyebrows furrowed. "Whatever it takes." Cade nodded, his royal bearings showing through despite weeks on the run. "I know where he's hiding. The Antares Rift, an old Imperial black site." Craig met the prince's eyes, a silent understanding passing between them. "Then that's where we're going." They gathered their team, Craig, Keed, Zara, and a hand-picked squad of Torvaz's best. Their ship slipped into the swirling chaos of the Antares Rift, sensors straining to penetrate the electromagnetic interference. As Krath's fortress loomed before them, Craig felt the weight of billions of lives on his shoulders. This was their last chance to save the conquered, and with it, the dream of lasting peace. "All right," Craig said, checking the charge on his plasma rifle. "Let's finish this." Craig's plasma rifle hummed to life as he led the strike team through the twisted corridors of Krath's fortress. The air crackled with ozone, punctuated by the staccato of weapons fire. Zara's voice echoed in his neural link, guiding them past automated defenses. "2 levels down," she instructed. "The lab's energy signature is off the charts." They breached the final blast door, revealing a cavernous chamber dominated by pulsing conduits and flickering holographic displays. At its center stood Krath, his eyes glowing an unnatural blue. "Welcome, Craig," Krath's voice reverberated unnaturally. "You're just in time to witness the birth of a new order." Craig's gaze darted to the massive device behind Krath, a tangle of alien technology that made his skin crawl. "What have you done?" Krath's lips curled into a cruel smile. "Merely unlock the true potential of our neural implants. Soon, billions will know the clarity of my vision." The air shimmered as Krath unleashed a psionic assault. Craig staggered, his mind turning. But Zara's countermeasures kicked in, a soothing coolness spreading through his neural pathways. "Now, Craig!" Zara shouted through the comm. He fired, the plasma bolt searing through Krath's defenses. The tyrant howled in pain and rage, lashing out with telekinetic force that sent Craig flying. The battle raged across the lab, consoles exploding in showers of sparks. Craig's team fought with desperate intensity, knowing the fate of the galactic realm hung in the balance. A deafening klaxon cut through the chaos. Krath's laughter filled the chamber. "Too late! This fortress will be your tomb!" Craig tackled Krath as the self-destruct sequence engaged. They grappled on the edge of a yawning chasm, debris raining around them. With a final surge of strength, Craig subdued his nemesis and activated his emergency beacon. The extraction was a blur of warning lights and lurching corridors. As their ship rocketed clear of the disintegrating fortress, Craig allowed himself a moment of grim satisfaction. But the victory tasted hollow as reports flooded in. Zoran had slipped the net, rallying his forces for a last, desperate stand. Days later, Craig stood on the bridge of the Concord flagship, surveying the armada assembling to meet Zoran's threat. General Torvaz's hologram flickered beside him, face etched with concern. "The outworlds are in chaos," Torvaz reported. "Zoran's propaganda is finding fertile ground." Craig's heart made. "And the moderates?" "Wavering. They fear Zoran's reprisals more than they trust our protection." A gentle hand touched Craig's arm. He turned to see Keed, the prince's eyes burning with drive. "Then we must show them a better way," Keed said. "Not through force, but through dialogue." Craig nodded, a spark of hope kindling in his chest. As they plotted their audacious diplomatic gambit, he knew the real work was just beginning. The coming days would test not just their strength, but the very ideals of the Concord itself. Craig's eyes narrowed as he studied the holographic battle projections. Zoran's forces were massing at the edge of Concord space, poised to strike. Time was running out. "We can't win this through conventional warfare," Key had said, his voice low. "Not without devastating losses on both sides." Craig nodded, a plan forming. "Then we don't fight conventionally. We target the heart of Zoran's coalition, the moderates who can be swayed." Over the next grueling weeks, Craig and Keed embarked on a series of clandestine meetings. They slipped past blockades and stealth shuttles, dodged patrols on war-torn outposts, and navigated the treacherous landscape of interstellar politics. In a dimly lit bunker on Navarro Prime, Craig faced down Admiral Jack Sithor, a key figure in Zoran's alliance. The Navaran's tentacles writhed with agitation as Craig spoke. "You've seen the reports of Earth," Craig said, activating a holo projector. Images of scarred landscapes and ruined cities flickered to life. "This was the result of our resource wars. Centuries of conflict, billions dead, and for what?" Jack Thor's compound eyes narrowed. "A cautionary tale, human. But how does this relate to our struggle?" "Because we learned painfully that vengeance breeds only more vengeance." Craig's voice grew passionate. "The Concord offers a way out of that cycle. Real justice, real healing, through accountability and genuine remorse." As Craig's words sank in, he saw a flicker of doubt in the Admiral's eyes. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Similar scenes played out across a dozen worlds. Craig shared stories of Earth's hard-won lessons, while Keed leveraged his royal connections to open doors previously barred. Slowly, painstakingly, opinions began to shift. On the Rakari colony of Zen 3, they scored a major victory. Governor Lyrax, a former hardliner, publicly denounced Zoran's warmongering. "We cannot build a future on the ashes of our own people," she declared. But their success came at a price. Word of Craig and Keed's mission spread, igniting fury among Zoran's inner circle. The exiled prince, desperate to maintain control, accelerated his plans for invasion. Craig and Keed raced back to Rakari Prime, their small ship pushing its engines to the limit. They arrived just as Zoran's armada dropped out of hyperspace, weapons already charging. "We're too late," Keed breathed, watching the first salvos streak towards the planet's defense grid. Craig's teeth gritted. "No, we still have a chance. Can you get us onto Zoran's flagship?" Keed's eyes widened as he grasped Craig's audacious plan. "It's suicide, but yes." They maneuvered through the chaos of battle, using the prince's command codes to slip past the flagship's defenses. As they docked, alarms blared throughout the massive vessel. Craig and Keed fought their way to the bridge, plasma bolts sizzling past them. They burst through the final set of blast doors to find Zoran, his face contorted with rage. "Traitors!" Zoran spat, drawing his ceremonial blade. "You would doom our people to weakness and subjugation." "Brother, please," Kaid pleaded, stepping forward. "This path leads only to destruction. For all of us." For a moment, something flickered in Zoran's eyes, a hint of the bond they once shared. But before he could respond, the bridge rocked with a massive impact. "Incoming transmission," a panicked officer called out. It's Admiral Velos." The view screen crackled to life, revealing Velos's scarred visage. "Surrender, insurgents," he growled, "or be destroyed." As Velos's ships opened fire, Craig realized with horror that they were caught in a three-way battle. Rakari vessels, believing their princes to be under attack, began firing on both Zoran and Velos's fleets. Keed's face was ashen as he watched his people tear each other apart. He turned to Craig, his expression resolute. "There's only one way to stop this." Craig's eyes widened as he grasped Keed's meaning. "The reactor core. But that would—" Keed nodded grimly. "It's the only way to save them from themselves." As they raced towards engineering, Craig's mind reeled. Could this really be how it ended? Not with triumph, but with sacrifice? The reactor chamber was a maelstrom of warning klaxons and frantic technicians. Kaid strode purposefully to the main control panel, his royal authority clearing a path. "Keed, wait," Craig said, grabbing his arm. "There has to be another way." The prince's eyes were filled with a mix of sorrow and commitment. Sometimes, the only path forward requires letting go of the past. He began inputting the override sequence. Chaos erupted as the reactor's containment field began to destabilize. Craig and Keed fought their way back towards the hangar bay, hoping against hope to reach an escape pod. The last thing Craig saw before a blinding flash engulfed everything was Keed's face, set with grim persistence. Then, darkness. In the shocked silence that followed the explosion, Queen Zara's voice rang out across all frequencies. "Enough," she commanded, her tone brooking no argument. "This madness ends now." The blinding flash faded, replaced by a kaleidoscope of pain. Craig's consciousness flickered, catching fragments of voices and sensations. Rough hands dragging him across metal flooring. The acrid smell of burning circuitry. A woman's voice, urgent and unfamiliar. "Stabilize them! We're losing the prince!" Darkness consumed him once more. Craig awoke to the steady hum of medical equipment. His eyes struggled to focus on the ramshackle clinic around him. Dented metal walls, makeshift cots. The air tasted of ozone and disinfectant. "Welcome back," a gruff voice said. Craig turned to see a scarred Rakari separatist watching him warily. "You're lucky Jax's crew pulled you out when they did." As Craig's mind cleared, the memories came rushing back. The reactor, Keed's face, moments before. His heart raced. "Where's your royal friend?" The separatist jerked his head towards another cot. "Still breathing, barely." Craig struggled to sit up, wincing at the protest from his battered body. He took in their unlikely saviors, a motley crew of outcasts and rebels. Aliens of various species moved with purpose through the clinic, many bearing visible cybernetic enhancements. A willowy figure approached, her features a mirror image of Zara's. Yet where the princess exuded warmth, this woman's eyes held a cold tenacity. "I am Thara," she said, her voice clipped. "Jax asked us to keep you alive. Don't make me regret that decision." Before Craig could respond, alarms blared throughout the compound. A young hacker burst into the clinic, his holographic interface flickering wildly. "Thara, we've intercepted a transmission. It's Velos, he's making his move." Thara's expression hardened. She turned to Craig, eyeing him with grudging respect. "If you want to save your precious conquered human, now's your chance to prove it." Craig met her gaze, steeling himself for the fight ahead. Whatever Velos had planned, they had to stop it, or everything they'd sacrificed would be for nothing.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, And for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.